Hey everybody, this is Mr. Storm, and in this video we are going to learn how to use the Godot, I'm going to call it Godot, that sounds about right. It's G-O-D-O-T, so I'm just going to use, I don't know, probably Godot. So we're going to use the Godot game engine. The way that it works, well first, I'm going to give everybody access to this game engine. If you need the executable file, you can actually go to their website, Godot.com, and download, and it'll give you just a compressed folder with the game engine and the command script in it. All you have to do is extract it out of that folder. I've put mine right here on the desktop. You just grab those and bring them out, or you can click extract depending on the type of compression software you have. Anyway, I'm going to double click on this so we can open it up. Now notice that I've already created a project. Yours is going to look different because you won't have a project that you've created. I'm going to click New Project. Now this is going to ask me, where do I want to put my project? Every time you create a new Godot project, it needs to be in its own folder. So first I'm going to click Browse, and I'm going to look for the folder where I want to put it. So if I go to my C drive, and it's going to C, Users, David, and then OneDrive. I don't want the OneDrive, so I'm going to go up and up. So now I'm at my root folder. Let's see. I want this to go to, let's go to Documents. Yeah, we'll go to Documents. And then I will say, we'll put it in projects. We'll create a projects folder. Actually, back up. I'm gonna just go straight into documents as raw. And then I will select current folder. And then I'm gonna name my project. Let's call it Pong. You can even create a document, or inside your documents, you can create a, your name, game development or whatever. That way it'll be a little easier for you to find. But anyway, I'm going to create a new Pong project in my documents folder, and I want to click create folder because look, it says you have to choose an empty folder. So our projects have to go into an empty folder that has nothing else in it. So I'm going to click create folder, and it'll create a Pong folder inside that documents. I want to make sure that I choose the OpenGL ES3 renderer because it's the better quality, and our computers can definitely run it. I'm going to click create and edit. And it's going to open up the Godot game engine on my computer. All right. Now, there's an issue here. This is the 3D view. So we're not making a 3D game, so we don't need the 3D view. So the best way we can get out of this is, if we look up here, we have a couple of different views. We have 2D, 3D, script view, and asset library. Let's just go to 2D view so that we can see a more simplified two-dimensional view. Fantastic. Okay, now the first thing we need to do is we need to create a new scene. A scene, just like in Unity, when we were talking about Unity, a scene is really just a place where all of your assets and objects and everything that's going to be in your game exists in one scene. So over here in our scene menu, this would be like the hierarchy in Unity. I'm going to click on 2D scene, and it's going to create a new node 2D scene. I'm going to go ahead and rename that just by double clicking on it, and I'm going to call this game. So now we have a game scene where our game is going to exist. Okay. Now the first thing we have to do is we have to create some objects that are going to exist in this game. First, I'm going to create a ball. Get our ball bouncing around on the screen and moving and all that stuff. So to create a new object, we need to make it a child of this game scene, right? So it has to exist within our game, so we need to create it as a child. If we right click on here, we can click Add Child Node. All right, so now we have a ton of options here, right? What we really want is we want something called an area 2D. So an area 2D, right down here, An area 2D is an object that has collision and physics and audio and all of that stuff, right? So it has a bunch of components already attached to it, and this is going to be our actual object. So I'm going to click Create. Now it's created a new area 2D node as a child of our game scene. Okay, I'm going to right click, or not right click, I'm going to double click here and name this ball. Now notice that I'm typing everything lowercase. That's going to help when we get to programming later, and you'll see why. Okay, so now I have a ball. Let's add a sprite to my ball. So I need a sprite component or a sprite node. So I'm going to right click here, add child node, and I will type sprite. And it's just going to be a regular sprite. We don't need an animated sprite for this because this isn't going to be animated. So I'm going to click sprite and create. Okay. And then in order to create the sprite or make it actually look like something, we need to add something into this texture here. And so we have a bunch of options here, but we actually don't really want to play around too much with textures. We already have this icon, this Godot icon that they've given to us down here in our file system. Let's just grab that icon and drop it right into our texture spot. So now we actually have something in our sprite. Okay. Now, the last thing we want to do is we want to add a collision shape to this object. So the ball can recognize collisions, so the area 2D can recognize collisions, but we actually need a collision shape to tell it what our collider looks like. So I'm going to select ball again, right click, add child node, and the thing I'm looking for is collision shape 2D. So right down here, collision shape 2D. I'm going to click that and click create. And we have another error here. This one is saying, hey, you have a collision shape, but you haven't told us what the shape is. So we need to go over here to shape and say new rectangle shape 2D. All right, now notice that we now have a rectangle shape collider, and we can just drag this and make it into, so now we have a ball that has a collider and everything else. Now at this point, this is all set up. If we were to just start dragging, notice that I'm clicking and dragging, but it's not grabbing the whole thing. I just accidentally grabbed the whole shape. So that's going to get really annoying whenever you're trying to move things around in your scene. So once we have our object set up exactly the way we want, click on the ball, and then you're going to want to click this button here. And if we hover over it, it says group selected nodes. That makes sure that whenever we select this ball object, we're selecting the entire thing and its children. So I'm going to do that, and I can actually minimize this so that we don't see the other things. Now whenever I click and drag, I can move the whole thing, collider and all. Okay, perfect. So now it's ready to start, now we're ready to start programming. We want to move this thing around in the game. So let's talk about scripting a bit. And actually, I'm just noticing here, it says it's unsaved. We don't want to keep this unsaved because if, power goes out and we lose, and the computer shuts down, we don't want to lose our progress. So I'm going to go ahead and click Scene, Save Scene. And the scene can be game. That's fine. Click Save. Okay, so now we have our game is saved. All right, perfect. All right, now let's get into scripting. So on this ball object, now that I have it selected, to add a script to the ball, all I really have to do is click this plus script button right up here in the corner. So I'm going to click that. Now it gives me all these options. These are all fine. I want it to inherit area 2D so that we can actually access those collisions and stuff later. The template is fine. Our programming language is fine. We're going to use GD script, Godot script for this. Let's see. This is all good. This is all good. All right, perfect. I'm going to click create. And oh my gosh, this looks scary, right? Please don't freak out. This is not, let me see if I can make my, sorry, just one second. I'm trying to see if I can make my text a bit bigger so that it's easier for you to see. I'm not seeing a font. Anyway, I'll play around with it to see if I can make that a little bigger because it is kind of small. Let me see if I can just... No, doesn't look like... Oh, there we go. So if I hold Control and zoom. Perfect. So now that's a little bigger. All right, let's talk about what this means. So this is what we call a script. This is what computer programmers tend to play around in. They play around in something called a script. So right up here at the top, we have something that says extends area 2D. Extends means that it's borrowing from another script. We want that to be there so that we can get access to the other functions in another script and we don't have to rewrite everything. So definitely don't delete what's up here in line 1. Looks like there's some empty space on lines 2 and 3. And then on line 4, 5, and 6, we have this little explainer. Now, these are comments. Comments are ignored by your compiler. So whenever we run this script, these lines are going to be completely ignored because they have this pound sign in front or hashtag, which means it's going to completely ignore everything. These are just kind of helpful tips here for us as programmers so that we can see how this works. So this is saying declare number variables here. Examples, var a equals 2, var b equals text. We're going to talk about variables later, so I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of those because we don't need them. Okay, now we have on my new line 3, we have another comment that says called when the node enters the scene tree for the first time. So that sounds kind of complicated, but what that really means is just this, whatever is below this comment, this is going to be called whenever this object, this ball object, first exists in the game. So because it's already there when we start the game, this is just going to call this whenever the game starts. So whatever we have inside of this function, so this function is called ready, and a function is just a kind of like just a section of code that can get run whenever it's called. This ready function will be called at the beginning of the game. So whatever's inside here, whatever's written in here, is going to call at the beginning of the game. Okay. Down here we have another comment that says called every frame. Delta is the elapsed time since the previous frame. So, but this function is commented out. We're going to get rid of the hashtag on line 8 here and the hashtag on line 9 to actually turn this into a function that's going to be working. So then we have function process delta. What this means is every single frame of the game is going to call function process. So if our game is running at, let's say, 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second, then we are going to call this process function every 30 times per second or 60 times per second. So in the function process, or in the process function, we want to put things that are going to be called over and over and over again. But in the ready function, we only want to put things that are going to be called once at the beginning of that object's existence. Okay, perfect. So that's what these things mean. Now let's actually start putting some stuff in there. First, we want to actually get our ball moving. And if we look at our ball, we can see that over here in the inspector, there are a lot of things that we can change about our ball. The one thing we do want to focus on here is this transform component, this transform option. Transform basically means its position on the screen. So if we look, as I move the ball around, the transform X and Y changes so that it will actually update and change and move, right? So if I put it roughly in the center, notice that we're at about 500 and 292. So I'm going to say 500 and we'll say 300. All right, so that should be roughly center of the screen. It's a little off, but that's fine. So then we have center, right? That's center. If we want it to start moving to the right, then it would need to start adding to the X value. Notice that as I slide it to the right, the X is going up, right? If we wanted it to move to the left, we would need to subtract from the X value. If we wanted to go up, we would subtract from the Y. And if we want to go down, we would add to the y. Now the y is going to be a bit confusing because we're subtracting to go up, but we're adding to go down. This is because over here in this point, we're at 0, 0. Ooh, let's see if I can get it right on there. There we go. We're at 0, 0, which is the origin of our project. So as we go down, we add to the y. Anyway, so we want to change that transform property every frame. So let's go back to script view. And what I want to do is I just want to add something called translate. And I'm going to delete that pass, and I'm going to actually add this in here. And translate is going to change my transform component. So I'm going to say translate, and because there's two different directions we can be moving, X and Y, we need something called a vector 2. A vector is basically just a combination of points in physical space. So I'm going to say vector 2, and then inside of a new set of parentheses, notice that the help tip popped up and it says X and Y. So my X is going to be the first number. Let's move it 5 on the X, and I don't know, 10 on the Y, and just see what that does. So let's give that a shot. I'm going to go back to, so at this point, our script should be attached. It's ready to go. To run this, I can either click this play button, which will play the whole game, and I can click play and it'll ask me, which scene do you want to be the main scene? Which one do you want to actually run? Or I can just run this scene by itself by clicking play scene. So I'm going to do that. Oh gosh, it just went right off the screen. Let's watch that again. Oof, and it's off. Okay, so let's slow that down just a bit. We'll say 1 and 2, just to see it a little bit more clearly. Okay, now I can see that I'm going 1 on the X and 2 on the Y, which gives me this kind of diagonal movement. Okay, perfect. So now we've actually written some code that makes our game behave, makes it do something. The problem here is, notice that whenever I wanted to change, I had to come back into the code and I had to change these values. We don't want to do that. What we want is we want to be able to change our code over here in the inspector so we don't always have to come back to the script. So values like the speed or the direction you're moving, you want to turn those into a variable. So I'm going to come up here and hit enter so I can, let's go to line 3, and I can create a new variable. So I'm going to create a variable, and var, let's call it, I don't know, speed. And I'll say that it equals vector 2 1 comma 2. So now we have a variable, and if I replace that part, notice it's exactly the same thing as what I wrote here. So instead of writing it twice, I can just replace it with this word speed. Let's test it to make sure it still works. And it does. It does exactly the same thing, but now I can just change it up here. But that's not good enough. I want to be able to change it over here. So in order to do that, all I have to do is right before the var, I can just write the word export. And what that's going to do is it's going to put it over here in a section called script variables. So if I'm, playing around in here and I want to change that speed to maybe 2 and 1, I don't have to go back into my script to change those variables. If I hit play, notice that it made that change for me. Or let's say instead of 1, let's say -1. Oh, hold on. -1, so that it goes up. There we go. So now I can change my variables right here instead of having to go into my script every time. Perfect. Okay, so now we have movement. The only problem is, notice that my ball would fly off my screen. So what I want to do is I want to contain it so that the ball won't leave my screen at all. So inside my function process, or my process function, my function named process, I'm going to hit enter, And I want to basically check to see if the position of my ball is outside of the bounds of my game. And if it is, I want to reverse its movement. Okay. So the way we can do that, we can say if, and we're looking for the global position. Okay. Global position is going to be the position of that object within the game. Okay. And I'm only looking for the x. Let's say if global position dot x is greater than, let's figure out what the x. So right there, it's about 990. We'll say 992 to be precise. So if global position is bigger than 992, then we'll say speed dot x times equals -1. Now let's talk about what this means. So we're going to take speed, which is this vector 2 up here, and the x, so specifically this number here, and we're going to multiply it by -1. Now, this looks a little bit funky, and if you've never taken any programming classes before or have no experience with programming, this might look really weird. All this means, this is a shorthand for speed x equals speed x times -1. So instead of writing it all out like that, we can use this shorthand. So speed x times equals -1 will multiply what's already in speed x by -1. And if you remember from math class, if you multiply by -1, it just reverses the negativity of that. So if it's a positive, it'll be negative. If it's a negative, it'll be a positive. Okay. And now we can actually copy and paste. Let's do this. Now, one thing that you have to pay attention to is these indentations here. They have to be, if you want this statement to be inside of this if, then it's indented underneath of it. But we don't want these separate ifs to be inside of each other. So I'm just going to make sure that all 4 of these statements are on the same level. Okay. All right. So that's the far right side. Let's figure out what the far left side looks like. And it looks like we're at about 31, 30 looks about perfect. So if it's less than 30, now we have to figure out the top and the bottom. So the top looks like it's about 520, 530. We'll say 530. Now we're not checking the x, we're going to check the y. And we're going to say if it's greater than 530. And then for the bottom, we'll say that's about, oh, I was looking at the x. It's not going to be 530. It's going to be 30 itself. So, sorry. And it's going to be if it's less than 30. I got that wrong. All right. And then greater than 567. All right. We'll do 567. 567. Okay. So now at this point, we've done some programming. Let's test this out to see if our ball stays within our project. Oh gosh, something happened there. That was a weird glitch. I think it's because I had it all the way at the bottom first to begin with. Oh no. Oh no. That was weird. Oh, it's because I forgot to change this. Ah, see, even seasoned programmers make mistakes from time to time. Now let's give it a shot. And actually, before we really run this, I want to change these variables so that they're a little bit neater. So one thing we can do here is this translate.speed. Let's multiply this by delta. What that's going to do is it's going to make it a lot smoother, but it's also going to make it a lot slower. Watch this. Look, it's barely moving. You can see that it's moving, but it's barely moving. So we need to improve these numbers by a lot. Let's say 500, and we'll say, I don't know, 50. And I'm changing them here, which will overwrite it in the script here, but I'm actually going to change them in the script too, just so that we know what our reference, our starting point is. All right. Oh, and I want to move this up so it's not colliding with the edge right away. Okay, so now it's bouncing, bouncing, bouncing. Uh-oh. It hit the bottom and it did something it wasn't supposed to do. Let's go back to our script. So if it's, let's see, if global position, I see. I also forgot to change these. So the speed Y needs to change, whenever we are lower than the Y. Okay, let's try it again. Okay, bounce, 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 bounce. Ooh, and it bounced up nicely. And let's watch it as it bounces off the top. I could have put a steeper angle on this, honestly, to test it, but oh, there we go. And it's bouncing quite nicely. Let me put a steeper angle on that, 250. Beautiful. All right, so now we have a ball that is contained within our play space. It's bouncing around, doing everything that it needs to do. Everything looks great. Perfect. Okay. Now, we've done a lot in 26 minutes. So I'm going to cut this video here and we will move on with the next video. We will talk about how to get paddles in there and get our paddles to actually interact with our balls or with our ball. And we will move on from there. So I'm going to make sure I save before I quit, and I will see you guys in the next video.